Hey, welcome to Car Guy Confessions, brought to you by ARP. I'm Jeff Smith. This is my car buddy Cam Benty and car builder Steve Strope, and we're going to tell you some stories. Welcome to another episode of Car Guy Confessions with Jeff Smith, brought to you by our friends at arp-bolts.com. And also, we want to give a shout out to our friends at the Grand National Roaster Show, Kevin Doyle, John Buck, and because they put us in this palatial place here on the corner. Right? Isn't this great? We got carpet on the floor. And we got audience and people going, how are those guys doing? right, yeah.
It's a nice spot, though.
So, yeah, it is. It's fun, as opposed to our little cubby hole we had before. That's great. So, John McGann, Hot Rod Magazine, good friend of mine. So, let's talk about Hot Rod, shall we?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
So how long have you been editor?
Well, I think it's 6 years now.
Really?
Which I know, the time is completely...
6 years.
And it's funny, Jeff, I've been telling a couple people today, but today, February 2, is my work anniversary. 21 years with the company. So February 2,
wow.
2004.
2004.
Was when I started salaried. I was the intern a little bit before.
Right.
Salaried.
And where did that start?
That was at the photo studio.
At the photo studio.
Our photo
That's right,
studio in Gardena.
In a Gardena.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was, just a quick
21 years. Dude,
I know.
That's great.
It's
well, maybe. I don't know. Is it great?
It is great.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm still happy. There's been a ton of changes.
Oh my!
Within our company, within the industry, within media.
Oh, yeah. Crazy stuff.
But I still do like what I do, and
you have to, right?
Yes.
You have to.
It's not. It would be absolutely miserable if you didn't like it.
Yeah.
It's. We're doing okay. We're
Good.
quarterly now. This is our 1 year of quarterly issues, which I get the decision of doing that, but I still wish we were monthly.
So just back up a little bit. So the company decided to take the magazine for the first time in its history, which was disappointing at best for me, personally, because it's like I was really afraid that this was just an interim step for them to kill it. And that's what scared me.
Yeah.
But as a quarterly, they gave you better paper. Mm-hmm. It looks really nice.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are doing a great job.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not the same thing, right?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And it is nice. So I heard all those rumors too, and it still could happen for all I know.
But it seems odd that they would pay to buy the titles.
Exactly.
Now, do you know this? Did Hearst get everything?
They did.
Okay, so all the previous titles that they've killed, those copyrights still exist.
Yes.
And Hearst bought that as well. So that you may or may not know this, the readers out there, or the viewers rather, that Hearst Publishing bought you roughly about, this is in February.
Right.
They bought you a couple months ago, right?
In November, actually we got the announcement during the PRI show.
Okay. So December. Yeah. Okay. Early December.
Hearst Magazines, Hearst Publishing Company bought us. And they've been in business since the 1800s. I didn't realize that, but I had a little bit of company history.
All right, yeah.
But the good news is exactly that it is a media company.
And
dedicated.
For the first time since EMAP, which was a true publishing company.
Yeah.
And somebody was asking about this the other day, and I said, I really enjoyed working for EMAP. EMAP was a lot of fun because, again, we were owned by a real publishing company, and they understood what it was that we did.
Yeah.
They didn't try and treat us like we were making a commodity, like we're just stamping out widgets, right? But that unfortunately happened later.
It did.
With other companies, other management teams that just did not understand. Yeah. And I suppose to give them a little bit of credit that why would they, not having come from a publishing standpoint? But it's you would think, just common sense, that's okay, we're going to buy a publishing company. Right. We should learn something about publishing, as opposed to, no, it's just like any other commodity. It's like, no, it's not.
No.
So what was I? Oh, I know what it was. I was watching a documentary. It was sort of a docudrama thing on Playboy.
Yeah.
And Hugh Hefner.
Yeah.
And how it all started. And so I thought, I want to watch this. I think it was on Netflix. I'm not sure. And the thing that stood out to me was how he approached the concept of building his magazine. And I don't really believe that that's the approach that Mr. Peterson took. Mr. Peterson took it, I think, from the outside more as maybe not in the beginning, very beginning, but at some point, at some point anyway, it shifted.
Yeah.
So Hefner, from the very beginning, it was editorially driven. That magazine was editorially driven from the very beginning. And, you know, I'm watching this thing, and they never actually said that.
Yeah.
But it was all the stuff that they represented as other from, I guess, interviews with Hefner and how he approached it, and how he wanted it, how he wanted it to look, how he wanted it to feel.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't about the naked ladies. It was about everything, not just that, but everything.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me, it's like, well, by the time I got there in 1979, it was certainly not that way. We were advertising driven.
Yes.
And a lot of times, so the battle that still probably continues to this day is really the battle with the advertising sales. And that's why EMAP was kind of a pleasure to work for, because, and I'm going to apologize, he probably never watched this, I don't remember the guy's name, that was our boss. And Jim Adolph was, so he brought us in, and he starts talking to us. And about the second or third meeting, he said, your book operates, it was when I was at Chevy High.
Yeah.
And so he goes, your book operates totally opposite from all these other books that we're dealing with. We went, really?
Yeah.
Why? And he goes, well, we sit in these meetings, and the publisher tells the editor what to do.
Right.
and he goes, but here, it kind of sounds like, he pointed at me, and it kind of sounds like you run the ship. And I go, oh, no, this is my boss. I do what he tells me to. And then Adolph says, no. He says, it's simple.
Yeah.
If you've got a strong editor, let the editor run the book,
right,
and then just go out and take orders.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so simple.
Yes.
And yet they couldn't, because I think it's because the advertising dollars are so big.
Yes.
Right? And but still, it's like, but if you want a quality product, that's what you got to have, right?
Yeah.
And if you hire the right guys behind to do the writing and to do the photography and to do the layouts, if you do that, and I think that was why we were so successful, because then when I went to that with Adolph, that was EMAP, so that was after Hot Rod. So when Harry and I had a meeting when they brought me in, I said, dude, you got to let me run the book and don't come in and dictate to me. And he did. He trusted me. Yeah. And so huge. And it maybe to the outside world, it's really not that big of a deal, but for those of us on the inside, it's really, that's what it's all about.
And
it's a
constant
battle. Right?
Yeah, it is.
And because I know when they had you run the book, there was that first sequence where they gave you no money. Right? Yeah. Because I called you and I said, okay, they just killed a bunch of books, and then they put you in charge, and so anything I can do to help you, and you said, I'd love to, but I don't have any money.
Right.
They didn't give you any budget. Right. So you were having to run the book. How do you do that?
It was tough. The money did show up pretty soon after that. But there was cost cutting measures for sure, and then try to rely on the staff, and then which is we had a staff at the time, which is
how big was it?
4 people, I think, total, which is I
mean, that's just criminal. Because when I was the other Hot Rod, I think that 15 or 17 people working for me.
You had your own receptionist.
Yeah, how about that? Someone that answered my phone for me is like, really? But I mean, I had probably Pat Ganal, Gray Baskerville, Marlon Davis, and Philippe Don, and Joe Pettit. Yeah. And then Bechtel was in there at some point as well, and a bunch of other guys, because they came in one very fluid situation. But people helped me. Yeah. You had what? One writer, and you?
Well,
How do you do that?
It would have been me taking over Hot Rod. There was still Marlon was still around.
Okay.
Philip Thomas. I'm trying to remember. And I know I'm forgetting.
So
some
counting
people,
yourself, but less than 5.
Yeah. And then all the other magazines went away, and then it's like, so I had some budget, and we had a smaller staff, but they kind of incorporated the people who were at the other magazines. That the magazines got killed, but the people stayed around. So Johnny, Steven, KJ, So we have
that probably did help.
Yeah, it helps.
But and then part of this also is cohesiveness, right?
Yeah.
So they were not necessarily, you were not as really, at least it doesn't sound like from the outside, as one team. And that's really important, if you want, because it's a very subtle thing.
Yeah.
But you can tell when it's working and when it isn't.
Yeah.
And or it's working, but it could be working up here. Right?
Yes.
And that's where that investment comes in.
Yeah.
Where everybody's pulling together, everybody understands what's going on. I mean, it sounds like, kumbaya, but it rarely was ever. But everybody pretty much was rowing. Everybody at the seat had an oar, and everybody was doing their job.
Yeah.
So it had to be tough when
it was. Yeah. When you left, and then our boss got promoted, and I was the only guy left at Carcraft, and so that was, I got thrown into the fire then,
you got thrown into the fire on that one,
that
and
was
you
tough.
were by yourself.
It was me completely by myself,
God.
and so that was tough. But the first couple of issues, the first issue that I was in charge of was we did the cover shoot at your house, with your orange Chevelle, and me pretending to work on the carburetor. And I'm always grateful for that. It allowed me to get my legs underneath me and sort of run with it. But I guess I don't pat myself on the back very much. But I guess one thing I would say is I've been able to be adaptable all this time and be like, okay, what do I do now? And figure something out.
Yeah,
we'd come close to being past our deadline, but I never miss a deadline.
Good.
I know. So
and that's another big thing too. That people don't understand. It's like, it's probably a floating deadline. No, it's a hard deadline, and you've got to meet it.
Right.
And it is absolutely a badge of honor, because not all magazines, even at Peterson in the heyday, would make their deadlines.
No.
So like in the old days, we'd have paste-up boards that was a whole spread, right? And you put them all in the box, and you shipped them to the Midwest where they were printed.
Yes.
And it all had to go in the box all at once, and it had and there were magazines that had holes in it when it shipped, and then you would get a blueprint of the magazine back, and that's when they would add the last few pages in. But that was always expensive.
Yep.
And there were books that so I would get people that would take jabs at us every once in a while, and it pissed me off, and I just go, so do you ship 100% all year long?
Right.
And they look at me and go, no, nobody does. I go, hey, we did.
Right.
And they go, check it out.
That's right.
Go call production and ask them who's shipping 100%.
Right.
Every month for the last 3 years. You know, and of course they back down.
Right.
So.
And the insider info there is the company gets charged a fee if they have to reschedule the press run, and so there's fees involved with that the company has to absorb, and so then it looks bad at you.
And I got a reputation as being somewhat of a hard charger. Right? I'm up there going, go faster.
Yeah, well.
But I felt it was a badge of honor for not just me, but for the whole staff to say, hey, we ship 100% on time to you.
It keeps that kind of scrutiny off of you as a individual, as an editor, and as a staff too. Like people are like, no, they get their job done, they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
But yes, Hearst Magazines is taking us over, and so in addition to us and Motor Trend, Hearst had previously purchased Car Driver and Road and Track.
Yes, and now they own all the titles.
Isn't that crazy?
All the automotive titles.
Yes, and
automobile.
Yes. So in addition, yes, they bought all the intellectual property. So Carcraft, all the, I think all of it, like Street Rodder, Roadkill, even. So they bought all those assets,
all the intellectual,
all the names.
Okay.
So the one thing I get is, I get two questions mostly is Carcraft or is Hot Rod going to go back to monthly? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I would love that.
They haven't told you that yet.
And then what's happening?
So.
I know. And then what's happening with the other magazines? Because it would be great to bring even Carcraft or something like that back as an SIP or a one-off.
Like at least SIP. Single issue publication. Yeah.
So like a once a year, or there's so much stuff.
Kind of like Elapsed Times.
Exactly,
really?
Like Elapsed Times.
That was great. That was so much fun.
Yeah, vintage. That was a vintage rag race magazine.
Yeah.
And
but if we could do that once a year, that would be very cool. Yeah.
And so I'm excited about all this, and it's been difficult to be excited. Very excited
with all the changes. Yeah.
But I'm excited about this because it does seem like, mostly we will be unique. Hot Rod will be unique within the repertoire of Hearst's automotive titles. The other three are all new car magazines.
Because everything else is pretty much aimed at new cars.
Yes,
right.
So we're the one aftermarket, and they're keeping all the events too. So we'll still be doing Power Tour and Drag Week.
Oh, cool.
And so that's coming with us too. And so I'm excited about that. So far,
and have they talked anything about video of any kind of what they want to do?
Not yet.
Hot Rod Garage, things like that. It's kind of up in the air.
I keep hearing rumors that those may be brought back as YouTube shows.
Okay.
Which would be great.
Sure.
You know, that's where we should be.
Doing
these things. So, but the transition is we're really early on into all that. So I think a lot of that stuff is at least that info still to be disseminated to us.
Right. Right. At some later date.
Yeah. But we're working on that. But things are going well. The quarterly format, like I was saying before, I'm happy they didn't kill the magazine.
Yeah.
So if it's either no Hot Rod magazine at all or quarterly,
we'll take the quarterly.
Yeah.
That's right. Hey, we'd like to thank our sponsor, ARP-bolts.com. We got a fantastic little backdrop here. They make an outstanding series of bolts, almost anything you would need for engines, chassis, things like that. In fact, we were at lunch today, and a guy asked you about the bolt on the back of your shirt, and and I said, well, it's really about a head bolt. They neck the stem down of the bolt on a short, small block Chevy head bolt, so the clamp load is even across 3 different head bolt lengths on a small block Chevy. And, so that's the kind of technology that you get out of ARP. And we've all got stories on all that stuff.
Well, for a translation of what he said, call ARPbolts.com.
but the message is that you can't get any better than that.
No, you cannot.
There you go.
Nope.
We'd like to thank our friends at InTheGarageMedia.com. They have 3 fantastic magazines. They've got Classic Truck Performance. They have Modern Rotting, and my favorite, All Chevy Performance, with Nick, my buddy Nick, is the editor.
Biased.
So yes, of course. But it's a fantastic book. They're doing print media, which is of course our favorite. So
in color and everything.
In color and everything, and you can get your car on the cover of one of those books, which is a fun deal.
Great tech.
Great tech.
By
You know, not always written by me,
famous
but
people.
Yeah.
Famous people
Not
have written all the
always
tech.
written by me.
That's right.
Just
So
pick it
check
up and
them out
read it.
at InTheGarageMedia.com, and they're our friends, and they will thank you.
And so we went up from 86 pages, which was embarrassingly low page count, where we were.
And I think it's worth explaining to the viewers how that really works. Now, I don't know how, the last generation that you were under Discovery, but back in our day, it was all editorial to ad ratio.
Yes.
And they always wanted more ads than edit.
Yes.
It was never 50-50.
Yeah.
That was we fought for it all the time, and they would never give it to us. And it's because of money, right? They don't want to spend the extra money for the extra pages.
Right.
So no, we'll keep it 60-40. 60% advertising and 40% editorial. And so it's not because you can't produce anymore.
Right.
It's because they can't sell the ads, right?
They weren't making
enough
money.
sales in the advertising side. And and that's you don't want to make it sound like those people weren't capable. I don't even know who they are, capable of doing their jobs. I'm sure they are, but there are all these limitations, right?
And then and you can appreciate this too, Jeff. Is there's so many more places now for advertisers to spend money than it was when.
Right. For instant response too, right? Digitally, you get almost instantaneous response to what's going on.
Yeah.
So. And I got to say that is interesting when I do something editorially on digital, and they know how very, very quickly how well it did.
Yeah.
It's almost like instant response, instant results, and so you benefit from that when it's good. You also take it on the chin when it's bad.
That's very
or
true.
Underperforming.
It's true.
So what's been the biggest shift since you went quarterly?
Since we went quarterly, the page count did go up. So we're 86 to 100. I was hoping for more, but we'll take 100.
Yeah.
And then the kind of shift in format was more of an issue theme.
Okay.
Like
we did the Pro Touring thing, we did Pro Street, things like that.
Single theme for each issue. And I think you and I have had discussions about this over the years, like the merits of a theme versus having a variety of things in the magazine.
Right,
so it's not all just one, Pro Touring
because the
type
problem with
cars.
that is it's great if it works.
Yes.
But if they're not response to, like, I had Evan Perkins on here earlier, and he brought up with the cover that he was the most proud of, which was the Danny Thompson cover and the interior. And I remember, because I was probably I was still living out in California, and the book just showed up in the mail, and I got it in my mailbox and went, oh,
that's a beautiful
this
picture.
is so cool. But it didn't do well.
Right.
And it's like, and it's a crapshoot, because I'm sure that I would like to think that the people here, as traditional hot rodders, would understand what that was.
Yeah.
Because Bonneville has an influence here.
Yeah.
But maybe your average street machine guy in
Iowa
can't appreciate it. But it unfortunately did not do well.
Yeah.
That's the risk you take, and we can tell them that the editors you get judged. Not me anymore. You get judged on how well the book does on the newsstand.
Absolutely.
And if it doesn't do well on the newsstand, they're beating threatening your job and everything else.
Get in there.
Maybe you should find another line of work. Then the next month you're a hero.
Exactly.
Right? But they have forgotten that you were they never forget that you were a putz. And every once in a while when you are a hero, they do forget that. So it never works. Wait a minute. What about this one? So it's what have you done for me lately? Yeah,
and
exactly.
then the other thing you used to say too is you're only as good as your last issue.
Yes, absolutely. Doesn't matter what you did 10 years ago. That's what these are for.
Yeah,
the fish was this big.
Exactly right.
When really it was a minnow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the differences are. We kind of cleaned up and simplified the format of the magazine. There's fewer departments. If you look at the cover, there's hardly any words on the cover anymore. It's just one big picture instead of a bunch of insets and
which is really nice and clean, because they used to beat us up over, God, put more on the cover.
I know. So I do like that. It's kind of more of an art piece. Now, the one thing I miss is the tech articles, which in a quarterly format, it doesn't work as well, and especially like a step-by-step or, someone comes out with a brake kit or a suspension kit or something. By the time we would be able to get it out in a quarterly magazine, half of the internet has already installed that on something, and it's all over YouTube and Instagram. And
so you think they may want you to bring that back? Because I would think, because that's going to bring in advertisers.
I would think
things
so
like
too.
That, and talk about it. It could be something that doesn't necessarily have to be ultimately timely as much as it is very useful.
Yeah.
Because what we used to always try to do is do something that your average guy could really appreciate. And and most of the time it didn't work all the time, but most of the time it did, because people really appreciated it.
Yeah.
And so that's tough, because being a technical guy,
right.
I remember John Diana asked me one time, so how much of your book is editorial or was feature, and how much was technical?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'm shooting for 50-50, and I was shocked to find out that it was mostly feature. It's like it was more like 60-40.
Sure.
And I thought, well, I need to bump this up.
Right. Yeah.
And then I thought, no, I don't think I want to change this, because it's working, right? And people appreciate the combination of the two. So, but it's difficult. It's like we've talked about this before. It's like trying to be everything to everybody. It can't work.
It doesn't.
So you have to be somewhat focused. And
yeah.
do you get comments about whether or not hot rod is traditional enough?
I have, and I've heard that I made I've said this in some recent interviews too, like, and this, I don't know much anything about cars older than 1965, for example, 64. It's like I had to really train myself to recognize a 33 versus a 34 Ford, and like a Model A versus a 32, and I still get that stuff wrong. Like Andy Leach's car here, when we went to look at it when he was unloading it off the trailer, I had absolutely no idea what I was looking at.
Yeah.
And now I was like, because I remember the distinctive thing about those Pontiac is those fins on the swoopy fenders.
Right.
The little ridges, they're not a fin, but those little ridges. And I was like, okay, but I didn't know. And they're one of their transport guys had to tell me. But I really made an effort to try to get some old, and that's my terminology, old car stuff, older than muscle car era stuff in hot rod. And I did get a lot of people saying they really appreciated that. It kind of got away from...
Well, you put Bill Ganal's car, the car that he built, on the cover. That generated, so for the... we'll have to maybe post a photo of the cover.
St. Christopher.
But it was the sequenced sort of slashed paint job with the different colors.
Yeah.
And that's a very what would be the word? Pivotal, not pivotal. You either love it or you hate it.
Very,
right?
very.
Controversial.
Yes,
Controversial.
Polarizing.
Yeah, there you go.
I know.
There's the word.
I believe that's September 20. I'm getting my years all mixed up. But I think it's a September issue.
2 years ago?
It's 2 years ago.
Okay.
So, but that was that and the 75th anniversary, I think, are my two favorite of my time at Hot Rod.
How tough was that?
Very.
Oh,
and
boy.
thank you for your help, because you contributed to that one. But that one especially, 75 years of Hot Rod Magazine, and the expectations of the audience, former staffers, people who would be looking at this thing and be like, I used to work there, and 20 years ago.
And that's something that you just brought up. It's what's worth pointing out that people think, we write it for everybody, and we do, but the reality is there's a handful, 10, 20 people that whose opinion you rely on and you really pay attention to. Some off the guy on the street, I mean, not to put them down or anything or to minimize their deal, but they say, great issue, thank you very much.
Yeah.
But when someone, we were contemporaries, someone who's done your job and says, because that's what I lived for, was either, and either way was either attaboys or criticism.
Yeah.
Say, I would have done this differently, I would have done this, and you take that in. That's really critical. Yeah.
It is, and and then the historical, people look back on those to do, so I started about 2 months prior to that issue, looking back in our archives at the other anniversary issues, the 40-year anniversary, and the
50th?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what do you do? And God, I started to get really stressed out too. I really stressed out. And it's funny, Jeff, the knee-jerk thing would have been let's put let's get let's get not a streamliner, but sort of a 32 on at El Mirage.
Yeah.
And the original cover.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, no, that was done on the 50th anniversary.
50th.
Yeah, they
for the 40th we did what we ended up doing. We thought it was a great idea, and then but photographically it just tanked. It didn't work. I don't think. But what we did was we made a billet. We had a 40th logo.
Yes. I remember that one.
Billet aluminum.
I had that on my desk
to this
for a
day,
while.
I don't know what happened to that. It disappeared.
The plaque.
The actual billet aluminum piece.
Yeah.
I think I have a pretty good idea what happened to it.
Sure.
But we won't say it here. So then we shot it 18 different ways, different colors and everything.
Yeah.
Jim Brown shot it for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is really cool because I knew what it looked like.
Yes.
Right. I knew what I saw in my mind's eye what it was, but everybody else is. You know what that looks like, don't you? I went, no. He says, it looks like corduroy.
Is there a texture
and to this
it?
day, it is the corduroy cover. And it's like, cool. It's like, and now, it's like somebody says, so those Rorschach tests where you say, well, I see the pony.
Yeah.
Well, I see this guy driving a dagger into somebody's heart. And now that they've said that, it's like, oh, it's the
That's
corduroy
all you
cover.
see. That's all you see.
So anyway, so how do you...
I don't know. I wish I knew what the inspiration was, but something clicked in my head about Gray Baskerville's car.
Okay.
And as kind of a way to honor probably one of the most well-known
and influential, of everybody who ever worked at Hot Rod.
Yes.
So that's great because it encompasses everybody in one image. Yeah.
Plus, it's a traditional hot rod. We didn't call it out specifically on the cover, but anyone who knew Gray Baskerville knew that car.
Knew that car.
And then we photographed it. Wes Allison did the photography at El Mirage. I had to spend a lot of money and time getting film permits too. That was crazy.
Yeah.
Not an easy process to shoot, do a still photo shoot
on some dry lake bed. What's the big deal? Yeah. Welcome to Southern California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But God, to be there and see that car, I never knew Gray. He died right before I started as an intern, so I never knew Gray. But so I'd heard about Gray all my career.
Yeah.
And to see Jim Shelton show up with that car, and on a lake bed, and it's just all that history, and combining different elements of Hot Rod's history too.
remember when I was in college, someone asked me one time, said, you see your journalism, you write, or yeah, okay. Who are your influences? I said, Tom Wolfe,
yes,
and Gray Baskerville.
I remember you telling me that years ago.
I think it was one of my professors, and he goes,
who?
Tom Wolfe, I get. This guy, Gray Baskerville, never heard of him before. He's only a staff writer for Hot Rod Magazine. Looked at me and just turned around and walked away.
That's so funny.
Because Gray would invent his own words.
Yeah.
It was funny because I would have copy editors come in and they would just go, this is not a real word, right? I go, I know, it's a Grayism. And they went, but it's not in the AP style guide. It's not in the dictionary. I go, that's the beauty of it.
That's right.
And they're like, no. And I went, yes, go away. Just let it be. Let it be. It's okay. It's okay. If this will not, it doesn't make you look bad as a copy editor. The readers understand it. They get it, and they expect it from Gray. So we're not editing that out. So just run along.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lingo we all speak, and it doesn't
Yes.
it doesn't exist in a dictionary or in a style guide.
Nope.
So.
Nope. It's fun talking to people who are not car people, and they say, "Yeah, this is a completely different language."
It totally,
it is.
yeah.
Unfortunately, it is.
It is.
I can translate for you if you'd like.
That's right. So. But yeah, those two issues are my favorite of my time.
Yeah, okay,
with Hot
cool.
Rod. And it was Kobe Gewertz's 33 Ford with that Bill Ganal did with the multicolored, multi-stripe paint job.
Yeah.
And I just love that car. I remember seeing it here when it was unveiled here for the first time, and just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And it's funny because some of the people who were judging Amber at the time were like, oh, I hate it,
because more traditionalist.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's funny, and I guess to your point, like that's the opposite of trying to please everybody.
Yes.
What Bill did with that car.
Let's whip the frenzy up here, shall we? Yeah. Let's see what really happens here if we do this.
Yeah. So those two are my favorite issues, and then actually I got to say too, the first quarterly one, the Pro Street issue with Rick
Dauberton's car. Yeah.
J2000 and Matt Hayes Thunderbird parked right behind it, and Wes Allison did that photo shoot again.
Yeah.
He did it in Phoenix. And gorgeous.
Oh, and that's another love-hate kind of car, and more hate now because they just don't. You have to understand the way it was.
Yeah.
And I still tell people this day, if a car comes up and they say, well, it's just stupid,
right,
wasn't practical, and I said, well, none of that stuff was practical.
No.
Matt's car was not practical.
No.
And so I said, you have to look at it kind of like from human nature. Pro Street, it blew up so fast that everybody's trying to beat. It's like, well, okay, Dauberton did the Nova.
Right.
I'm going to do something else.
Right.
Rocky Robertson goes crazy with the Buick, and and then Dauberton's got to beat his own drum and say, okay, I'm going to beat all you guys with build this ridiculous car.
Yeah.
And it's human nature to take it to almost to the cartoony or the extreme.
Right.
And then bring it back.
Right.
And then what does Scott Sullivan do? Brought it back with the 55, the Cheesewood's car.
Yeah.
So you can see how it evolves, and it's never really got that radical with the street rod side. Maybe it did with billet cars and things like that a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's just human nature.
Yeah.
And it's like, let it take its course.
Yeah.
And then someone will come up with a new idea and go, let's do this, you know. And what you're seeing now is like, phantom cars, or like what Troy's car is. There was never a fenderless car that done Ford did, but it looks like it was.
Yeah.
It looks like a Phaeton, or the car that was built.
Yeah.
So it's just fantastic. Yeah. So I think that's pretty cool. Yeah.
It is. That was a real treat too, I gotta say, because prior to Grand National Roadshow Show last year, the only time I'd met Rick was at the Street Machine Nationals that you, when we were at CarCraft,
okay,
put that together and brought some of the Pro Street guys in. And I remember meeting Rick then and didn't get to talk to him much, but getting ready for that issue, I had interviewed him on the phone. We talked for a couple hours on the phone. And then when the cars were brought here last year, and Matt brought both cars, and then Rick came to the show too, and he and I walked around the show for a couple of hours.
And so he shared with you what he's doing now. It's really innovative.
Yeah,
he does not really get credit.
No,
he does not get credit for you know, a lot of the stuff he does is outlandish, but his current thing with the Pro Touring stuff and the mid-engine stuff that you can do, and the rear axle setup with the IRSs and narrow frame rails and all that kind of stuff. And he had me half talked into doing a rear-engine, mid-engine S10 on my S10.
Yes, I remember that.
I'll go,
It would work.
This will fit, you know.
It would work.
It'll be tight, but it'll fit, you know. And I just thought, you know, I'd love to do it because imagine. Mid-engine anything, doesn't matter, S10, whatever it is, all the weight in the middle.
That's right.
For an autocross car, it'd be killer.
Right.
You know, but, you know, it's someone needs to do that, you know. Because the concept was basically an all-aluminum LS motor in the bed of the truck with a transaxle and put the radiator where it belongs. And it's like, whoa, dude, this would be so much fun.
That would be
so much fun.
That would be.
I think part of the problem was it's just a nothing vehicle. And I've got this outlandish drivetrain in something that people go, what were you thinking?
Right. I see what you mean.
But still, you know, So I don't think he gets enough credit for just how innovative and he's not an engineer. He's not an engineer, but he engineers his stuff. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it. We've done the show about his the
surface orbiter.
Surface orbiter. Yeah, it's just. I mean, it's crazy.
Yes.
You know, it's crazy. But he executed it and pulled it off. Yeah. So anyway, we're on tangent there.
Oh no, that's all right. But I did want to say about Rick, getting to meet him because. As an enthusiast, before I started working with the magazines, I wasn't a big fan. I caught the tail end of Pro Street, and I was like, you know, it was the tweed, and there's just like, you know, they kind of had become caricatures. Yes. So I was just in my head, I'm like, But to see the J2000 in person, and because Steve Strope talked to me too before we did the photo shoot, and then before I got to see it in person. Yeah. Just how meticulous the work was. Yes. Oh. All that polishing. And I talked to Rick when I was one of the questions.
Because he TIG welded that whole chassis together and then ground the welds down. And then polished it. Oh, my God. He did that all himself.
I asked him about that.
I have no idea how many welds are in that thing, but there's hundreds.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
I asked him about that. Like, if you nicked that piece of tube or the adjacent piece of tube.
What did you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'd have to go back, fill that in with
and
the TIG
grind it
welder.
Back down again.
And I was like, how? I don't know if he even remembered how long it took.
No, I don't think he does. Somewhere I saw a photo. I don't know if we ran it in the story or not, but there was, I think his wife at the time took a picture of him because he'd been out there for like a day and a half straight.
Oh,
you know, he's
covered
covered in
dust.
And he looked maniacal.
like he just came out of a coal mine in the 20s or 1920s. Like
crazy. And you know what? I'll bet you that like, you know, Troy's car, I believe, is the frame rail they built themselves.
Yeah.
They sculpted that frame rail out of multiple pieces because it's not a stamping. It's not when you go down to the roaster shop and buy one. They built it.
Yeah.
You know, and so that level is here today.
It is.
It just may not necessarily be as obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't have the body tilt up like that so you can see everything.
That's right.
That was the reason he did that.
Right.
So it's cool and it's unique.
Right.
Well, not unique to funny cars, but unique to Pro Street cars.
Sure.
And but yet really at this level now, every bit is probably 10 times worse. Or not worse, but 10 times better. In terms of and how much execution and time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun to, you know, with my 20 years with the company, and you've been a lot longer, but the evolution of build quality that we've seen, where somebody like Rick was an outlier, and now you can almost expect to see that kind of work.
Oh yeah, here, that's almost entry level. Yeah, and then you ramp it up from there because there's stuff here I don't have no idea how these guys do this.
It's fascinating.
You know? Yeah.
The that 35 Chevrolet that's up for the Slonaker Award this year here at the show, built by Ironworks Speed and Custom. To take that all in, and the I guess the difference in or the advancements in manufacturing technology to the CNC machining, 3D printing,
3D printing,
somebody's, I forget, one of the Amber cars has 3D printed exhaust manifolds.
Really?
Inconel, 3D printed Inconel exhaust manifolds.
Wow! And, how does that work?
I know. And I'm sorry I can't remember who, but they were saying the person whose car it is was like, yeah, you need a machine big enough, like you can, you know.
Yeah.
yeah, you can put Inconel on a 3D metal printer, but you need a machine big enough to make an exhaust manifold.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the next level.
Wild.
And
that's just
it's
wild.
like, can you imagine trying to be a hot rod shop now and needing to buy a 3D scanner, 3D printer, like even just the plastic one to do modeling, and then do you step up to a 3D
when it used
printer?
to be like Scott Sullivan's out there on the floor with an angle grinder and a MIG welder.
And it's funny, that was a great conversation that I had with Scott a year ago when we were looking at some of the Slonaker cars, and like, and I totally get it from his perspective. A lot of the art and the art aspect of it, the sort of organic, handmade feel tends to go away.
Yeah.
And so I did talk to a guy, one of the other builders who did a lot of 3D printing and stuff. And it's how do you make a 3D printed part or components look organic? They'll always kind of have a feel like there's no way somebody could make this, but so, and that's in the programming and the way that the parts are shaped and curves rather than hard edges. And so it's really interesting, I think, what car building has become. I don't know. and the fact that people can still make a career even at this level, not everyone can afford Cal Auto Creations to build them a car, or, Troy Trepanier, but, somebody can buy a 3D scanner and send parts out to be made and build customer cars that way.
And then you pull it back slightly and say, I can't spend $2 million to build a car, but if I'm creative enough, I can get close. Right. And I think that maybe this could just be obviously postulating, but it's like if you get close. Then it won't. It's not going to compete for Amber, maybe not even for Slonaker, but because there's a Mustang here. Or no. It looks like a Mustang from the back. It's the Cougar, the fastback Cougar. Yeah. And we spent 10 minutes on that car.
Yeah,
it's just spectacular.
It is. Yeah.
And it's like, and it's like, wow.
Absolutely, I know.
Because I was standing there thinking, well, if I was the editor, I'd want to shoot this car. Man, this is fantastic.
I know what you mean.
So I think maybe that's an area that could expand, because it's like I don't know. I have no idea how much they spent to build that car. Probably quite a bit. A lot of sheet metal work.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah. And it's like you're saying too about pendulums and trends. Like maybe the pendulum swings back the other way, where it's like, I just want a handmade, home-built car with zero CNC machine. It's like the no billet movement in the
exactly.
in the 2000s.
Yeah.
So it's funny to see where
and I'm sure that something like that will happen, because it almost has to, because otherwise it's like, no, everything has to be at that Amber level or Slonaker level, and it can't be. It can't be.
No.
Because then it's like, it's just unobtainium, It's like no one can afford to be here except this little clique here, It's almost like what kart racing did to Indy 500. It almost destroyed it, because it's like, well, we're getting up on this mountain of these 4, 5, or 6 car builders.
That's right.
Or car owners, and then we're going to pull the ladder up behind us.
That's
and
right.
we're not going to let you up here with us. And it's like, no, everybody should have access to that.
That's right.
So and it did. It swung back, and now IndyCar racing is fantastic. So there will always be competition here, right? There will always be people wanting to build the next fun car, and there'll be shops that go, okay, we built this, and now we can build a little bit better this year, then now better the next year, and that's how it's going to fly. So.
It's cool, the trends we have seen too, Jeff. Like, who would have thought trucks would be desirable?
Yeah.
I can't have a conversation with you without talking about pickup trucks.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So I bought Jeff's old pickup truck from your CarCraft days. 93 GMC Project Jake.
Yep.
And the former Caltrans truck.
And sadly, its partner, which is Tim Moore's truck that he built, the orange truck. And when my buddy Tim passed away, I helped his sister, get rid of all his stuff, his GT40, car that we sold that to Jay Jones. Yeah. And got rid of his tools and liquidated all the stuff. And then she gave me his orange 93.
Yeah.
And what I really wanted to do, and I wish now I had done it, was to leave it here, so I'd have something to drive when we come out for these events. I come out 2-3 times a year, and I'd have something to drive, and I wouldn't have to borrow Kevin's mom's car. To have something to drive, but it wouldn't pass smog. I couldn't get the check engine light off because the code that it gave me was telling me that this component that it didn't have had failed. It's like, well, this truck doesn't have that.
Doesn't have an
Like,
air
sorry,
pump.
That's what it is. So I gave up, and we shipped it back to Iowa, and my son was driving a 2007 Tahoe, and we were going to rebuild it because it had 300,000 miles on it. So while it was down, I gave him my 93 truck to drive, and got nailed in the back of the freeway. So it had to come here. It had to come to Iowa to get destroyed. It pushed the bed right up into the cab. He's lucky he didn't get hurt.
Wow.
And it didn't look that bad. It was a little bit dog-legged,
Yeah.
And so I took it to the body shop, to get the insurance adjuster. And he walked outside. It was 15 yards away. He looked at it and goes, "Yeah, it's junk." It's junk.
That's too bad.
So, well, can we look at it? He goes, "I'll humor you, but it's junk." And we started looking, and it pushed the cab into the bed into the cab.
Yeah.
And that was so. The orange truck is gone. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I really would like to have saved it. I would have had a motor built for it.
Oh,
I had a motor,
bet,
and I was going
yeah.
to do the transmission, and then because it had 300,000 on it on the original 305
that's amazing.
motor.
That's amazing.
Its tongue was hanging out.
Oh, I'm sure.
It was tired, in bold letters.
Yeah.
But it was still running, and my son was complaining because it gets terrible gas mileage. Well, you would too if you had 300,000 miles on you. So but it didn't survive. So the trucks are fun.
They are. You'll be pleased to know.
So what's your plan for it?
Well,
for yours?
The
former
brother
survivor,
yours, you'll be pleased to hear 419,000 miles on it right
Oh,
now.
my God.
I know, which I love. I love that thing.
400,000 miles.
I've said it to you before, but even when we were working together on staff, and it was still yours, like way before I even bought it. I always loved that truck.
Yeah.
So, it's the one major change is it's lowered a little bit more, so it's on RideTech's full coilover suspension system, which is really neat. It's got that A-arm in the back that holds the rear axle in place.
The downside to mine was when Tim and I did the trucks, we had two suspension systems we were going to do, so we wanted to make them different.
Yeah.
But you still look the same.
Yeah.
And I asked him, which one do you want? He goes, "I'll take the drop spindle."
Right.
I should have taken the drop spindle. We put the short springs in it, and it had about this much suspension travel. And you borrowed it one time driving home on the 405. Remember you told me there was this dip in the 405 in the fast lane. You said you caught air in the truck.
Yeah. And it's funny too. One of the shocks was broken, I think, too. So, but that was after I bought it. But but the bottom shock was full.
Because it literally had about maybe an inch of suspension travel. And then I used to haul trailers with it. And when we put trailers on, it was on the bump stops the whole way.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
So
the message here is don't do as we do, do as we say.
Yeah.
Because we don't always do the right thing either.
No.
Yeah, it's fun.
So it's RideTech coilovers. I love the way it drives. It drives really nice.
Yeah.
But I've tried to put an engine and transmission in the bed, and it it bottomed out the shocks in the back. So I can either crank the ride height way up. I could change the springs out on the coilovers in the back. But I did take away a little bit of the functionality
of the practicality
of the pickup truck. But I
as
love
John Pearlie Huffman used to say, got rid of all that pesky utility.
Now, being here in California and working for Hot Rod, I can't just get a fake smog certificate or register out of state. It looks bad on me if I do something like that.
Yes.
So, I'm going to keep that. What I really want to do is put a 5-speed in it, just because so it could be a manual.
Okay.
I'd love to have a manual, just because the C10's manual. I prefer manual transmission. So like a TKX.
Okay.
American Powertrain sells a kit for OBS Chevys, and
cool.
And then just drive it. Like I'm happy with it. It still runs good. Would I? I've entertained for about a year the thought of doing a CARB legal California emissions LS swap, but pricing that out, even if we were
the difference, because I looked into that a little bit because for the same reason, and to pull a junkyard motor, you can do that, but then you have to have the whole fuel system, everything, every sensor, everything.
Right.
Whereas the old the Chevrolet crate system that they had set up, that allowed you some latitude. Because when I did my little S10, I mentioned to the guy that he passed my truck, and I said, well, I should have done an LS, but I didn't want to do I would not have wanted to done the crate, the legal crate engine. E-rod package.
E-rod.
And he goes, well, if you don't use the E-rod package, then you have to, he said literally you would have to transplant the original fuel tank.
Yeah.
Or if not that, all the sensors, all the fittings, everything.
Right.
And I thought, I don't want to do that. Oh. That's too much work. But it still would be a great idea. That's one of the benefits of living in Iowa, by the way. See,
I know. I think about that now. It's funny. Hearst has a work for or in-office policy now, where we didn't since COVID. We've been like fully remote.
Okay.
And I love California, but I've thought of like going somewhere a little bit less expensive and a little bit less restrictive in that area. And
for your hot rods.
Yeah. But.
It's okay.
It'll be all right.
Yeah.
And I'll figure it out. But yeah, I just love that truck.
Yeah.
It drives so good.
Yeah.
And I've written Colin, we've talked about this too, but like you're the consummate recycler if you keep an old car on the road.
Absolutely. I did a column a million years ago that said you can recycle beer cans and pop cans for the rest of your life and never come close to what you do to recycle an older vehicle as opposed to just crush it, get rid of it. It's an old vehicle. It's like, no.
Yeah, and buying some disposable car every 3 years, it just doesn't make any sense.
And what's odd is, I don't know if you know this, but they changed the specs. The emission specs, what used to pass, then it was when I owned the truck. Because 1 year I went and I passed, the next year I didn't. And it had the vehicle hadn't changed. Well, they changed the rules. You can't do that. Oh no, we did. It made it tougher. Because my feeling, just my own personal opinion, California wants those things off the road.
100%.
They don't want them. They don't want them on the road. They want you driving a Tesla.
Yeah. And one thing I will, one rant I will go on is, because I remember you telling me that, and then I did look back at some old smog certificates from after I bought it from you, and the HCs, the allowable hydrocarbon levels.
Hydrocarbons
did go down.
Yeah.
Just, a little bit, but.
Like arbitrarily lowered it.
Yeah,
and those were specs that they got from GM.
Right.
So
the car was built to a certain.
They said, well, our experience over the years is such that so we're going to lower the standards. So I think you can use numbers. You can use numbers to prove anything that you
Absolutely.
want. It's not the truth, but it's you can use the numbers. So
and then
it just didn't work.
That and then the other rant I want to go on is the California compliant catalytic converters, which I think is a pure scam.
Yeah,
I will just say that because it costs 4 times as much.
4 times.
Wow. I just looked at the catalytic converter for the pickup truck at Summit Racing. It's $140. California compliant is at least $430.
Wow.
The most recent one I put on was $700.
Really?
So if that becomes a thing if that becomes a wear item, an expendable, like a consumable wear item on the truck.
It is,
and it becomes a $700 hit every 2 years or every 4 years or whenever these things, because they don't last as long as here's my rant, they don't last as long as an original catalytic converter, GM converter.
Right.
So if that becomes a wear item, they are pricing you out of a car that's perfectly fine.
I don't know if it's necessarily intentional as much as it is rather a situation where they just don't understand what they're doing. You know, it's like,
right.
Well, we won't get into it.
Yes, I know. I take it personally because I got skin in the game. But yeah. So.
All right. Well, John, thank you so much. This has been great.
I love that. Yeah.
We can do this again.
I love it, Jeff. It's great to see you.
Yeah. And go out and buy Hot Rod Magazine.
Yeah, please do.
I feel like Steve right now. Just do that.
Yeah. Subscribe to hotrod.com. We still pull out a monthly magazine, and we got a lot of web coverage, and we're doing coverage right here from the show. So
excellent.
It's been a great run.
Well, we want to thank our sponsors, ARP-bolts.com.
That's right.
There was almost a hesitation there, wasn't there? And, of course, our friends from the Grand National Roadster Show. They gave us this place, little corners, to do this deal. And if you like what we're doing, just keep watching, and we'll keep telling you stories.